Okay, good morning. My name is Carmen Reyes. I'm gonna talk about plead guilty with a reason of insanity. There's also two ways to plead guilty with this reasoning that I'm gonna explain at this time. Plead guilty. There's just one way of proceeding in a trial that the accused will plead guilty. He or her will be in charge of the charges that it had, and it will be the accused will plead guilty of the charges it's been accused, but with reason of insanity, meaning at the moment of the events it had a medical condition which determined the actions. This can be done in different type of ways. The person can plead guilty. He can say that yes, I did it, but I wasn't conscious of what I was doing. And the most common one is the plead not guilty. The not guilty by reason of insanity is a plea entered by a defendant in a criminal trial, where the defendant claims that they were so mentally disturbed or incapacitated at the time of the offense that they did not have the required intention to commit the crime, and are therefore not guilty. That this is one of the ways that most of the trials go on in this type of situations, where they can try to plead guilty at that time, plead not guilty at the time, that they can say like, it was not in his right mind when he does that, when he do that. The problem of this is it's hard to prove it. Is it hard to reason behind it? The plead not guilty is way harder to prove than is it to actually say it. Most of these cases go to normal procedures instead of going to a mental institution, as most of the defendants want. And the statistics are way low as it is, but we will talk about it after. The procedure: the defense will proceed to plead not guilty for reason of insanity with proof or the instability of his defendant, declaring him or her not intentional of committing the crime. At that time, the defense goes with reason of insanity, pleads not guilty or guilty at that time, and they can have this different reasonings about and proof to say that it was actually not on his right mind or on her right mind. It will have to take proof of psychologists, psychiatrists, and it will have to do different tests about the proof. But the proof, we will talk about it later in this presentation. We will talk about right now about the statistics. The insanity defense is using only 1% of all criminal proceedings, and its success rate is only 25% of it, that 1%. Therefore, less than 1 in 400 defendants are found not guilty by reason of insanity in this country. It's very hard to prove. It's very hard to reasoning behind the plead not guilty. It has to have a lot of proof, a lot of backup, a lot of convincing to the jury that the person didn't actually intend to commit the crime. It's way different to say like the person wanted to do it, and most of the case they believe they actually wanted to do it because of hate, because of background, because of a story that is under the way of the things that they were happening at the moment. So it depends on the story of the person, but the statistics show that less than 1 in 400 cases goes to reason of insanity. And it's crazy to prove. It's very hard to prove. Mostly in this type of cases that they try to plead not guilty or guilty for reason of insanity, most of the jurors want them to go to prison instead of going to a mental institution at the time of this happening. But mostly if they go to a mental institution, they will be for life in that mental institution also. So it's very hard to reason with the statistics, very hard to reason with everything that's going on. Now we go with the proof. In general, every crime involves 3 elements: actus reus, the act of conduct; mens rea, the individual's mental state of the time of the act; and third, there has to be a connection between the act and the effect. A person is only not guilty of a crime if he or she actually didn't intend to commit the crime. If a driver accidentally hits someone with their car, they are not guilty of vehicular homicide. However, if the driver had the intention to harm the person, the action is the same, but the intention is different. At this time that I was talking about, it was about proof and about intention. I think that mostly of the trials that goes with pled guilty or reason of insanity are cases that it wasn't with intention. It was like out of mind, out of anger, out of hate, with no rationality behind these acts. So at this time, they have to prove that they actually didn't intend to do the crimes, that they were not in their right mind to do all of these acts that they did. And there has been a lot of cases that they tried to plead this card for saying that way, and it doesn't work. But some cases actually do. They have completely proof, psychiatrists, psychologists, medical information, psychoanalysis, and different tests that we do. And how to prove it, this is one of the ways to prove how a person is mentally ill and they can play not guilty. Mental illness can alter a person's perception of reality so that he or she does not realize the criminal nature of his or her actions, or has no choice but to commit the crime. When this is the case, certain courts believe that the person lacks this element of intention necessary for criminal guilt. States rely on 4 different ways of determining the defendant is legally insane: Nat-Steigen's test, Durham rule, the irresistible impulse test, and the model penal code. For I was reading, every single state in the United States has a different method of actually knowing the legality of the insanity. Most of the states requires 2 of these tests: the Nat-Steigen's test, the Durham rule. Others just require the model penal code or the irresistible impulse test. But most of them requires the Nat-Steigen test. That is a psychological background history test that I feel that is the most complete of the tests that they do. Why? Because they search for the background of the person, search for what connection do they have with the incident, if they know the person, if they know the persons, what did the person did to them, if they have absolutely no connection with each other, what happened in his mind at the time, if anything impulses that situation, if everything in their past triggers the situation. And it's a very complete test to determine the insanity of the person. There's also this is an example case. This is the Arnie Johnson case that they played innocent on the basis of demonic possession. At first, he was being tried for the murder of the landlord Alan Bono. After the testimony of the Warrens, the specialists in the demonic possessions, they determined the case as not guilty for reason of insanity. This case was very interesting because it involved the Warrens. The Warrens is barely known nowadays because of the Conjuring movies. They were looking always for demonic possessions, and in this case, they go to the Arnie Johnson house that they believe that it was under a possession, a demonic possession. They determined, and they said in the trial case, that Arnie Johnson was in a demonic possession at the time of the murder. He killed the landlord in his house at the time of the thing. He doesn't remember anything that happened that night. They prove it. They have a specialist that night that he actually didn't remember anything that happened, that he wasn't under some kind of mental ill at that time. So they determined that the case was not guilty for reason of insanity, not as a demonic possession, but a reason of insanity. He went 20 years to a mental institution based on this situation because of good behavior and everything was happening, he got out of the mental institution, and now he's living his life normal. But he still believes nowadays that he was demonic possessed. Here are all my sources of this presentation. I hope you like it. I like it a lot, especially about learning more about the case of Ernie Johnson. But it's very, very interesting, and very interesting this about the class. Thank you so much.